Welcome to Conversations Through Alzheimer's. I'm Amber Marty.
And I'm Felicia Wood. We're sisters and daughters of Rosemary Marty, diagnosed with Alzheimer's in June of 2025.
We're documenting her journey as it happens, and we're sharing every resource we find along the way.
This is her story.
And ours. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Conversations Through Alzheimer's. Today, we are doing things a little bit different here. Usually, it's just me and Felicia that you're hearing from, but today we're going to be having our dad, Lyle, on as a guest. We've heard from our mom a little bit, but we thought it was important to have him on as the primary caregiver for my mom that lives with him every day and give his perspective on things. But before we get into that, we wanted to do our weekly check-in to see where we're at with each other and where we are at with our mom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this week has been a little bit different because, as you know, I was just in Chicago for work, and it's always a little interesting when I have to leave for work. I do travel, it's been a lot of travel this year. It's not always this much, but I always notice that it's a little bit interesting because obviously in my back and forth with mom, I tell mom hey, I'm have a trip to Chicago coming up. And it's always a little interesting leading up to that with her. She's always trying to, why are you going again? How long are you going for? Where are you going again? Those are definitely those details that don't stick. And then what's also ironic is it feels like every time I go and whenever I'm traveling for work, it's a full day event, right? It's nonstop from the moment I get there until pretty much I'm at the airport. In fact, you and I were chatting last night trying to catch up, and I was sitting at the airport, and I think I was sitting there eating some food, and I just felt so brain dead because it's a lot. But all of that is just to say that when seems like every time that I travel, there's always some sort of family drama. Weeks will pass here at home where we don't really hear from dad out of the blue, or things don't really happen. And then it seems like every trip it's I need you to call your mom, XYZ is happening, or did you know that this got planned? Or it just seems like there's always something. And I'll look down in a meeting, and then it's my phone is blowing up. I see text from mom, I see text from dad, I see text from you. And then I feel bad for you because then I'm can you deal with this? And I feel a little bad because you tend to take the brunt of that. So thank you. And also, what is up with the universe? That timing, it's every time I'm out of town, that's what seems to happen.
Not just you. I remember dad calling me when I was literally about to board my Alaskan sled dog helicopter excursion in Alaska. Dad called me literally 5 minutes before and is crisis, blah, blah, blah. And of course, it's never really a crisis. And it's have some awareness, please. We're traveling. But we don't say that, but that's how we feel. Can this wait just a couple days? Yeah. It'll probably be resolved by that time anyway on its own.
It's true. And it is funny because I feel he definitely is we've talked about this before, you're going to see the older sister part of me coming out. And I don't know if we've ever disclosed that I'm the older sister, but I am the older sister. And I feel I'm hello, I'm the first person we call. Unless I distribute Amber out and I say, hey, you go take care of this. In my head, I'm I should be the first one called. But because I am really busy and because there's a lot of things going on, you've been such an amazing resource for them. You can help with the insurance stuff. You've helped with the healthcare provider things. You've helped with so many things that you've sadly become the default person. And then you end up on a trip getting phone calls like that. And what have I told you?
To call you?
Or to have them call me, to tell them I can't deal with this. Call Felicia.
Yeah.
And you don't do that very often.
Maybe you're busy.
Yeah, but I can still manage things.
Me too. I listened to dad for 5 minutes and then I said, okay, I'm getting on a helicopter now. Maybe we can talk about this when I get back. And then I went on that.
Yeah, I do. I remember that.
But in terms of this week, because that was back in May, in terms of this week, my interactions with mom was honestly great. I mean, I was talking to dad yesterday and he mentioned something about how she signed them up for, like, it sounded like a caregiver support group. And then, so I asked a bunch of questions. I was like, why would mom sign them up for a caregiver
You
support
didn't
group?
even think that like when you heard that, you didn't even think she was probably capable of signing them up
Yeah,
for something like
like,
that, right?
like
Because
that's a
she's had
multi-step
trouble with that.
process. Exactly. So I was like, I was very confused. I asked a lot of questions, and he was getting frustrated with me, being like, "This is what this says." Like she forwarded me the email, and it was like something about like lecture, like Stanley Lake Library, um, which is like their local library, like all a caregiver lecture. And the title
It
was
was
like
the
a
emotional roller
emotional
coaster.
roller coaster of caregivers for Alzheimer's people or something. And so I was
That
like,
was definitely not the title.
no, 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 the title was something like along those lines, like enough to where I could Google it and get the actual information.
Okay. Okay.
That's the point of this, is like I was like something along the lines of, I typed in Stanley Lake Library, the date, and like emotional roller coaster caregivers, and like I was like, okay, I found this thing, and I was like, okay, so it looks like this is a lecture that like maybe the Alzheimer's Association chapter for Denver is putting on at this library. It sounds really cool. Like I wish I could have gone, but it's definitely for caregivers. Like mom should not be going to this. So like then I had to call mom, and I was really like, I don't want to say proud, but like surprised, I guess is the right word, that she was able to like sign them up, and that's great that she like got that email and thought about them and wanted to do that. But like I let her know like this is for caregivers and she should stay home with Bella and take the night.
Did Dad go?
As far as I'm aware, yeah, he went. I haven't touched base with him. And I will say, like, for preface, um, we did this recording with him on Sunday of this week. It's now Wednesday, so we haven't talked to him. We're doing things kind of out of order. Usually we a little behind the scenes. We usually record things same day in order, but we did this recording with Dad, and now we're doing this intro recording after the fact. So
Yeah.
we will not be able to ask him about that in today's episode because it
Yeah,
was
well
days
said.
ago.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think part of the reason that we wanted to have him on is, well, it was really important for us to be able to have him and his perspective represented. Like, full transparency, he's listened to every episode of the podcast. There's been a couple times that he's called me and said like, I don't know if you represented that very fairly. And he acknowledges, he's like, you shouldn't be sharing my perspective because it's my perspective. Like you guys have your own right to tell your story in your way. Like you have your own lens on things. I think that's always great that he's been supportive of that. But in kind of having this dialogue back and forth, I realized I'm like, it would be really important to have him on and actually have him have a chance to kind of speak to his own perspective on things, his own side of things. And I will say, I think planting that seed, like leading up to the actual interview where we had him on, you can definitely tell that he at least had been thinking about some of the things that he wanted to say because honestly, like we probably could have just let him talk and not asked him any questions
Yeah,
and he would have been able to fill up the entire time.
for sure.
Because he's a, well, one, like
Just that type of person.
he's that type of person. I'm always very into astrology and I always say like he's definitely a Gemini in terms of like he has a lot, he's very intellectual, he has got a lot to say, he has a perspective on things, very creative person. And you'll I think you'll get to see that a little bit in the sense that like he has a creative way of communicating too. Like he definitely is like kind of a takes the scenic route sometimes to get to an answer because I did actually ask him questions. You're about to hear this, but I think it's good to know that going in. Like I think our dad definitely he has a lot to share. He's got a lot of wisdom to share, but he's definitely can sometimes. And one of the things I was thinking about because you're like you said, like we did record this, we had a chance to kind of think about it before we're now sharing this preface. Is I think it's a loaded topic for him too, right? Like this is his life. His wife was diagnosed with this disease very unexpectedly for him a year ago. It turned his life upside down, and so I think you're going to hear that come through in his answers too. It's like this is obviously a very complicated and layered conversation for him. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, I do. And like, I just wanted to preface as well, like a lot of things you're going to hear is from his own lens. Like he is 28 years sober, and that is a big part of who he is. He's a big part of AA still and everything, and he's very much a Christian, involved in the church, and so you're going to hear a lot of like verbiage or things that he says that it might just like help with that context, like talking about sacrificing and all this stuff. Like just know like
Yeah.
that for some context, like that is what you're hearing, is those lens and views that you
Yeah,
have.
he's definitely speaks to things as though everybody he's listening to is also very familiar with those words, right? Like the idea of like surrender and like sacrifice, like you said. He talks a lot about like what he's learned and like also kind of like a moral hierarchy of like what are the right things to do and like what is the role of like marriage, and he's definitely thinking of that through his traditional lens, which there's nothing wrong with that. Like we're all different, but I think it's worth that going in knowing that that's who he is and that's how he communicates.
Yes. And like the other thing I just wanted to point out is like, as Felicia mentioned, this was like his first time on this. This is his life. This is very real. Like this was very authentic for him. Like he even told us like we've discussed with him off the record, like he understands like why couples get divorced. Like it is a very hard disease. They're navigating this for the first time just like anybody else is. And so it's just
it's a good point, and it kind of brings up something that you I think touched on last week, where you're talking about like your triggers don't go away just because the person that you love gets diagnosed with Alzheimer's, right? Like, and they've been together for 40 years. They just celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary earlier this year, and so I think that's like you can imagine like the kind of history people have together after 40 years. Like, is there a lot of love there? Yes, absolutely. But like there's also communication patterns, and like I think all couples have like a dance that they do. Like when you act this way, then I start to act this way. And like I think, you know, honestly, it was really interesting. Like you'll hear us talk to him a little bit about like those early symptoms. And I didn't know what he was going to say for that. I thought that was really interesting. And he actually brought up that he noticed that she would be like on her iPad a lot. And I don't know if you remember, Amber, like that used to be a very big point of contention for him early on.
Yeah, it definitely was. Well, we could summarize the whole thing, or we can let you listen to it. So with that, why don't we get into the interview, and I hope you all enjoy.
Yes, let's get to it. But actually, one more thing before we get started. One thing I wanted to point out is there's a point in the episode where Dad calls himself the primary care provider. And first of all, I want to say it's worth noting, like, none of us like regularly call ourselves like caregivers in real life, right? Like if you listen to our earlier episodes, Amber and I referred to ourselves as caretakers quite a bit because we didn't really understand like the lingo of like how it goes, right? Like there's care providers who are actually like medical professionals. There's caregivers who are the people that are more in the house. And then there are things like caretakers, but those are usually people who you like hire on for tasks that are around caregiving. So I don't know. We're learning it ourselves, and so we'll give some grace to Dad. But yeah, we thought that was funny.
What the funny part is too is like, I don't know if he mentions it in the episode, but he retired last year from Children's Hospital. So I just want people to know, like, he was not a primary care provider. He was not a PCP at Children's Hospital. He worked in IT. So when he says primary care provider, he just means like being a caregiver for his wife.
Yeah, he means he's providing her care. Yeah, exactly. And he does. Like he provides her love. He gives himself to her in terms of like taking care of her. So,
but it's funny because, you know, me and Felicia always like say our slogan is "We are daughters, not doctors," and then here comes Dad. Oh, I'm the primary care provider. He is also not a doctor. He is a husband.
None of us are doctors. None of us know what
we're figuring it out.
We're all just real people figuring this out as we go. So anyway, with that, let's go ahead and bring in Dad.
Hi, Dad. Welcome in.
Well, thank you. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm extremely proud of both of you for what you're doing. I think it's a wonderful service, and just makes me feel very proud of you guys for the effort you're putting into this. And one thing I wanted to point out is um, especially in Alzheimer's, a part that you guys may not have mentioned, and that is with this disease, there really is two people that need treatment. The primary care provider, such as myself, I had a lot to learn and things about my own personality. I'm a very intense person. I'm very opinionated and I don't usually back down. But when it comes to your mother, my intensity is harmful to her. It can put her into trauma. And and as you know too, I'm a Christian. I'm a religious man, and so I've had to learn that some things I thought that were just my right to be myself is not necessarily true. That I have to sacrifice myself a little bit to support my wife and help her in what she's going through, and along those
Yeah.
lines, it's really making me really a better person and a little bit more tolerant and accepting and patient. So,
Yes.
that's what's
Well,
really amazing, important point.
yes, absolutely. And I think that's exactly why we were happy to have you on today. We wanted to really be able to have this conversation with you, hear your perspective on things. So, if you don't mind, I want to kind of back up to the beginning a little bit. We've shared our perspective of what it felt like when mom was going through that process of being diagnosed. What can you share from your perspective of those early days? Like, did you ever suspect that there was any kind of Alzheimer's or memory loss? And when did you start to? And then, if yes, like when was that for you in comparison to when she was actually diagnosed?
Well, looking back, it's pretty easy to see when I believe things have started. In fact, one of the things your mother likes to do is she likes to take her iPad and she plays games on it. I forget the different ones. But I was telling her this morning that I realize now, because I was actually ended up being kind of a point of contention in our marriage. It's like, well, come on, let's hang out together and, stop playing that game and stuff. And I realize now that your mother probably knew something was wrong, but couldn't quite figure it out. And playing this game kind of kept her in a rhythm and a focus to where she didn't have to be quite cognitive of it. And so at first, the real big trigger to me was 2019 when she had changed careers and got another job, and she came home and said she was actually laid off. It was but she felt it was more like being fired, and there were some skills that seemed to lack, or just sometimes you forget how to do things. And a good example was like your taskbar on a Windows PC. You can move that around and stuff like that. And she had difficulty of things like that just are so automatic. And when she lost her job, I thought, okay, that's fine. She's going to get another one. And then it became apparent that she wasn't going to get one, and I didn't know what was going on. And your mom's had trauma that hadn't been addressed. It's the mental health kind of issues your mother's struggled with, anxiety and depression her whole life. And so some of those things she thought that might be it. And so she knew something wasn't quite right. So she thought, well, maybe it's ADHD. And it basically was anything and everything except Alzheimer's. So that was really the very difficult part. I wanted to really just take things as they come. Let's see what happens. And that was the biggest thing, was getting her the cognitive testing, and that's what really laid it out for us. So yeah, there's definitely something going on here. And then with your mom's personality and stuff, once she makes up her mind about something, she pretty much will not let go of it. So the idea that, to have Alzheimer's was like her biggest fear in the world. So I think, just as a defense mechanism, she's going to try to figure everything out other than that. And I think
Mhm.
one of the issues and the problems is I was trying to follow her along that line and be supportive of her, and in a way that may have delayed uh, diagnosis and stuff like that. But I figured you just have to take things as they come.
Well, That's a really interesting point because, I think looking back at, kind of the conversations we were having as a family, right? Is there something going on? Are we asking the right questions? Can we have an evaluation? What does the evaluation mean? All of those things. I think it's always easier to look back from a plate like from in hindsight, right? Hey, now I can connect dots because I know what the answer was. It's very different to be living it and not knowing that there was an actual diagnosis, right? So I am curious, what you're kind of describing is um maybe like what does it feel like to process that in real time? Like the word I'm thinking of is denial, but not in a bad way, right? Like not like in a
Right.
I'm choosing to be avoidant of this, but so I'm curious, like what does that actually feel like to be inside of that while it's happening? Like of course you don't want your spouse to end up being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, right?
During this time of the diagnosis, it was really a very stressful time in the marriage. I mean, we're talking not only did it rock her world, it rocked mine completely. I had planned on actually retiring uh, from Children's Hospital this October is when I wanted to retire so that I could do the legacy dinner with 30 years behind my belt. And with this coming up and with the diagnosis, it changed everything. So I ended up retiring last December. I wanted to be able to spend as much time with her as I could while she's still with herself. And then uh, the whole learning thing, I mean, from a psychological, emotional, even a spiritual point of view, uh, this totally rocked our whole world in a not so good way. So the hardest thing
Yeah.
for me to deal with this was, from what I've learned and stuff, this type of disease is so devastating in the sense that I've lost my wife in a lot of ways already, and that's why I think your mother is just so super super lucky. Is I think of women or men that have this disease and they're by themselves. Oh my gosh,
Mm.
it's horrible. And for your mom, she has that. She has all the support, which is great. And so the hardest thing for me in all this is really just the adjustment and going, okay, when do I do this? A good example was, um, and you talked about kind of the denial. We had an incident where your mother had her lumbar puncture to get more accurate information on whether she could do these infusion treatments and stuff. And this is a good example where I learned. Oh, just recently, back in April, I was lucky enough to purchase a property, 39 acres by Hartselle, Colorado. And it's been a dream of mine for my whole life since like 13 to have that type of land and stuff. And so we took her in to get the lumbar puncture, and they said, there's things that could happen, severe headaches, that type of stuff. Nothing life threatening, but if you are experiencing these things, you can go to the hospital right away. I think it's called a blood patch, and it immediately relieves the symptoms. Well, your mother, when we did that, your mother said, "No, I want you to go. I want you to go up to your place and do this," and I did. And with the idea, I'm only 2 hours away, that I could get back right away. I think part of her disease is she's denying that stuff, and when it was hurting, instead of like right away going, you know what, I think you need to come back, she was like no. And then I was like, trusting her. And so I had to learn a lot about that, about, hey, even though she says this stuff, it may not necessarily be true. And so then I realized, then was one of my learning curves, is when there is procedures or something to go on, I need to make sure that the thing is completely done before I do go off. And that's the thing now is, can I go up there? Your mother wants me to do that. I want to do that to get rejuvenated if I can. And I'll also make sure she's okay. But that's also a sad thing for me too. That's a dream I was hoping we'd be able to share together. And that was one of the big things I think that from a caregiver that maybe you guys don't aware of day to day is when I did take her up there, and I thought this would be all this joyful, wonderful thing. It was really terrible because things I take for granted, I mean, we don't have any running water up there or stuff like that, but which is no big deal for a normal person. But if you got Alzheimer's and you start to get dementia and just simple, basic sequencing things, I need to do
Mhm.
this causes a tremendous amount of frustration. So instead of being something we could share, enjoy together, I realized, well, maybe from a God's point of view, this is something God wants for me. And to help rejuvenate me, to help take care of her. And then I have to grieve the loss of, I thought that'd be something we'd be able to share together. So the biggest thing
Yeah.
about this really is the emotional thing. And I think I've stressed that to girls quite a bit, that my biggest thing isn't the physical part of the dementia and what's happening there. It really is the psychological pain and spiritual and emotional suffering that she'd go through. You know, why me? This isn't fair. And to have your greatest fear come true. A lot of anger and depression and self pity and all normal reactions. I'm not saying this is anything bad, but at the same time, you know, I'm having to adjust. Like, wait a minute, she's still my wife, obviously, and I still love her, but the things that I expected of her, part of her personality, part of her everything that makes her she is, well, as these tau tangles destroy more and more neurons, it destroys that part of her brain that does this type of stuff. So for me, that's really really hard uh, to
Yeah.
uh, to see that happening. But it really is a
Yeah.
big adjustment.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot there. You're kind of speaking to what people say Alzheimer's is the long goodbye, right? It's you're constantly moving through that process of realizing that the person that you could depend on isn't that person anymore. They're slowly changing and morphing into something different. And so I appreciate you speaking to that. I am curious, like, do you have if there were somebody that came to you and said, "Hey, I'm a spouse. My spouse was just diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's today," what kind of advice would you give to that person who's recently in the shoes that you've been in over the last year?
I think that you got the biggest thing is you really have to learn a lot of patience, and I think it forces you to live in real time and to make that adjustment. Because you know, looking back, I believe your mom's had Alzheimer's since 2019. And then I think that's the other thing is learn as much as you can, get involved in any support groups. More knowledge you have, the better off you are. Also need to learn the limitations. But for somebody like in my position of being a spouse, I think the biggest thing you really need to learn is the whole emotional aspect of it. Like for instance, I think even with you guys, I'm learning to speak a little bit softer and not go quite so fast. And I had to learn that. So in order to support my wife and support Rose and love her the way, you know, she should be loved, I've had to do that. Or sometimes because the intensity traumatizes her so much, maybe I'll make up a funny voice. You know,
Mhm.
the data is still the same, the information's still the same, but it's in a way that's humorous or whatever. And then that helps your mom. Because for me, the biggest thing is, and that's what I think it depends on. One thing you guys have said that's true is if you know somebody with Alzheimer's, you know a person with Alzheimer's. There isn't one size fits all. And my experience with your mother has been, you know, the it's emotionally has been the hardest thing of her getting used to it and you know, asking for help and stuff like that. And she's gotten good at that now. In fact, this morning, to help her cognitive ability, she needs to work on puzzles and stuff like that. So um, Amber started a puzzle for her when she was out here, and she's been working on that. And I went and looked at it this morning. I go, "Wow, it's pretty good. Looks like you're making progress." And what I'm learning about her is she puts herself down. Oh no, this is about, I go, "Rose, this is not a job. You don't get a prize if you finish it in a week, you know." But it gives me some insight into how she's thinking, you know. In other words, it's just the doing of it, honey, that's important to you. You know, as long as you're doing it, that helps your memory, that helps this stuff. If you get 7 pieces as opposed to 2, that's not the point. The point is to actually be doing it. And that's what I'm really glad of because it's something I've been wanting her to do, but I can't force your mom to do anything. Well, you can't force anybody to do anything. So she did that, and it was really really great, and she's starting to accept it more. And that was another thing as a big learning curve that I offer anybody is don't argue. Always try to maintain this simple thing. The other thing that I try to do too is she asked me something 12 times. I make sure that the 12th time is like I heard it for the first time. That's a part as a caregiver that you have to adjust to, because to go make statements like say, "Well, aren't you paying attention? Aren't you listening?" That is destructive. For a normal person who has full cognitive ability and they're just being an idiot and not paying attention, that's one thing. But for another person who says, "Wait, I just don't got the neurons ain't snapping for." Have no idea what you're saying, and I don't want to tell you I don't have any idea what you're saying because it makes me look stupid. Well, then nobody wants to
Yeah.
feel stupid. So, and even now, every day is a learning experience. So, on the good side
Yeah,
of this disease, it's really making me to be a lot better man, without a doubt, and
for
more
sure.
kind and more tolerant. So,
Yeah, Dad, I
and
feel
then
like,
you guys
you
have
know,
given some
from
great advice too. So, like you don't ever argue with them. You always got to keep in that space, and it's kind of weird too for me because there's some days like I'll hear your mom talking on the phone, and I swear there's nothing wrong with her. She's fine. She's great but she's not having to think. She's not having to use cognitive ability. Like you have an instance like you guys are talking, that's fine. Now let's say she goes out someplace and comes home and wants to tell me about it. And then she has to call things, put things in sequences, and that's frustrating. And so that's why, like, I like watching her, like, make her eggs in the morning. And that's something you guys gave me insight to that. Uh, and I learned just like when you open up the refrigerator, I could never understand why it was such a disaster area in my mind because I'm a pretty organized person, because that is the way she sees it. That's the way her brain processes it. Well, this morning, she opened the refrigerator, and on the middle shelf on the far right-hand side is the water she had and that she's going to use. And she was looking right at it. And because I know what's going on now and I've learned, I was able to go, oh, yeah, here it is. It's right here, in a nice, gentle way where I know the other always like, what's wrong with you? It's right in front of your eyes. Come on, pay attention. And,
yeah,
as you guys know, that's how I teach, which may
it's your
not be very
style.
but now right, but now it's like, no, she really cannot see it. So, for me,
But
the
Dad,
good thing is I've learned to develop a lot more empathy.
I love these examples you're giving because I think they're so important. And I will say, I've seen a tremendous growth over you in the last 6 months in particular, where it really seems like this approach that you're sharing, the patience, the making the 12th time the same as the first time, the showing things that she can't see, helping her through that. What do you feel like made that click for you? Because it doesn't happen overnight, right? It don't just become that the second you get see Alzheimer's on a piece of paper, right? It takes time to, I guess, come to was it did you have to come to terms with it? Did you see her respond positively when you did do those changes? Like what helped you actually get to that point where you were able to do that?
I think it's really, learning about, dementia, which is an aspect of Alzheimer's, that she's experiencing and that realizing well, it's like you say, it's a long goodbye, and I guess that's the biggest thing in a way is the realization that my marriage and my relationship in many ways is dying and gone, and I think that's a really big important point because out of this terrible thing that's happening, really a lot of great things are happening too. I mean, as far as like you said, you guys have noticed a change in me, and hopefully I'm a little bit more empathetic, more caring, and more understanding, which is kind of a good thing to be, I think. And so I don't know, it's difficult. I think that's the hardest part is you for a man or a woman taking care of a spouse is also you need to find that support group that there's many times now that I can't and I won't tell your mother what I'm feeling or thinking because that part is not there anymore. And to do that really is about me and my issues and my thing. And I'm not the one with Alzheimer's. She is. So it's not about me. So I think another big part too is, how are you as an individual person? And so
Yeah,
there's grieving. It's
of
really a
course.
mixed bag. There's a grieving of
Yeah,
losing somebody, and there's also the joy of becoming a better person. And also
yeah.
there's a lot of fun stuff that me and your mom have too. We got what I call Alzheimer charades. That thing that TV. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's kind of fun. And you can have some fun with it too, That
Yeah,
it's not all doom
that's
and gloom.
awesome. That's great, Dad. Um, is there anything that you could share from being the spouse that is the caregiver? What do you wish people knew in terms of how to support you or how to talk to you about your wife having Alzheimer's or about Alzheimer's in general?
That's really interesting because there's so many stereotypes. And what I would encourage people to do is make sure keeping those social contacts going. And your mother's done great with that with her sorority and people from church. But what happens is sometimes people, they don't know how to act or whatever. So they tend to disconnect. And that's why I say is really encourage that type of thing on that. And the main thing is just to go easy on yourself and easy on them and realizing that that was another hard part too, is when person gets real negative or angry or says a lot of things that might be what they really feel, but they don't really mean, is you have to get to the point where if you take it too personally, it's just going to destroy you in that sense. But you have to be able to realize that that's the disease. And I think the other thing too is to not be a martyr. That you got to take care of yourself if you're a primary care provider. Also, this might sound stupid. Enjoy it. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. And there is a lot of really kind of fun and humorous things about what she's going through and a lot of fun things. But it's also like, say, tragic. For one minute, I'm thinking, and I've had to learn about like when a person, is going downhill, that sometimes you could just have a bad day, because that's what I'm going through now as you get to be fluid is like, uh, her traveling. We started out to where, okay, dropped her off at the airport and drove home, and that's the way it goes. And then we got to the point, I said, well, wait a minute, I need to really take her right up to the gate and learn that type of stuff and picking up and the traveling. So you got to really be flexible and be
Yeah.
alert.
Yeah. Gosh. Well, Dad, I know that, gosh, I feel like we've covered a lot today. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your perspective, but also thank you for taking care of our mom. Like we don't get to say that often as probably as often as we should. You are there taking care of her every day. And I've said this to you before, we acknowledge that it's a sacrifice. It is not always easy. It is full of a ton of really legitimate frustrations, but it's very cool to see how you are taking a really positive approach to that. And I hope that's made a meaningful difference for you. I'm sure that it has, but I know it's also made a really meaningful difference for mom. So thank you.
Well, that's why I'm just really, really blessed. God's been so good to me with you girls. You guys, especially Amber, has done so incredibly uh, stuff to like help us get our house cleaned up, go through things. It's it's really been funny having. Well, that's the other thing. A person my age or whatever, I'll tell the people out there, get used to and be patient with your children as they parent you. And you guys have been doing a pretty good job of parenting me indirectly, and I appreciate that to a degree. But if it wasn't for you guys, in other words, you made my life caring for her so much easier, and the way we're coordinating everything, and actually, like you guys have brought us a kind of the team approach, and that's where I just feel the ultimate. I mean, she got a really
Yeah.
good life thanks to you girls, and I just so appreciative of both of you for what you've
Well,
been
thank
doing.
you.
Make me feel I might have done something right in raising you.
Awesome. All right, Dad. Well, we won't keep you any longer. We really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have you back on again next season as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. I love you guys. Bye bye.
Well, that was our dad. That is, um, there's a lot there. I'm really glad that we had a dad on to share his perspective. It is It is different thinking about it from that perspective, from the spouse. And I will just echo what I said to him, which is I think it has made a meaningful difference for mom. The more that he has been willing to change how he communicates, the more that he's been willing to volunteer to take her places and really show her through his actions that he is there for her. I think it has definitely made a meaningful difference in how the last several months have gone for her. Would you agree?
Yeah, I've heard mom say multiple times, like, "Oh, dad was so sweet. He asked me, if I wanted this," or "Dad was so sweet." Like, I've heard "dad is so sweet" a lot, like at least a couple times a week the last few months.
Wow.
So,
I would say that's a very positive report card.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I would also just echo like I think it makes a really I would also say I do think that education piece really mattered. And we won't know for sure, but I think really focusing on when we started doing family meetings and we really started to align on like what is Alzheimer's and what are some of the things that are happening, we really went back to like the actual evidence of what's happening and the real strategies that are proven in research. Like, at least for our dad, that made a really big difference. I think, gosh, there's probably a lot here, even in terms of how kids can help their parents who are also caregivers and probably a vice versa conversation as well. But I hope that was meaningful for you to have that kind of perspective.
Yes. And with that, just want to remind everyone that we will be at the Western New York Walk to End Alzheimer's on September 26th of this year, 2026. If you'd like to join or donate, I'll put that link in the show notes and we would appreciate your support.
Yes. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If there's any questions that you have, any comments, we'd love your feedback. This is an ongoing conversation. We are figuring this out as we go. So thanks again for tuning in today, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
If this episode resonated with you, or if someone you love is navigating an Alzheimer's diagnosis, please know you don't have to fight it alone. The Alzheimer's Association is a free 24/7 resource available to anyone who needs their support. Whether you're newly diagnosed, deep in caregiving, or just trying to understand what comes next, you can reach them anytime at 1-800-272-3900. You can also reach them online at alz.org.